York. Ebro in the morning on Hot 97.
It's Ebro in the morning, Laura Stiles. And the wonderful, amazing representative from New York City and what's your department?
It's the Commissioner of Human Rights.
She is the Commissioner of Human Rights, Miss Carmelina
Malalis.
See, I screwed the whole thing.
Carmelin Malalis.
Carmelin Malalis. So Carmelin, Miss, or do I call you Miss Malalis?
You can call me Carmelin.
Or Your Honor. How does it work with a commissioner? What is the
Carmelin or Commissioner Malalis?
Commissioner Malalis? First of all, I didn't even know New York City had a Commissioner of Human Rights.
And that's what we were talking about behind the scenes.
I didn't even know that was a thing. So great to meet you.
Thank you.
Second, I just got my new driver's license because my birthday just came up, so I went and got another one. So it's the new kind of thing here. You said I need my NYC city ID.
Your ID NYC.
ID NYC.
Yep.
And why do I need this?
Because it's a city ID.
Okay.
You don't need a driver's license in order to have official ID in New York City. We have our own ID NYC, which will suffice for identification purposes.
With the police and...
With the police.
ICE?
ICE.
You know, ICE is out here snatching people up.
That's right. I mean...
Invasion of the body snatchers out here with ICE.
Right.
And they honor it?
I don't know if ICE would honor it, frankly, because there's a lot of things going on right now with ICE that I'm not sure what is being honored, frankly, and what is not being honored.
I want to say our mayor said that we, as the city, would honor the ID, and you don't have to worry about that. But yes, you're correct. I don't believe he said that ICE, per se, which is a federal group, would necessarily honor.
Correct. But there's so many things, obviously, in the city that folks need ID for.
Okay.
And ID NYC should suffice for many of those things. And then I was also just explaining to you some of the perks of getting ID NYC is you get so many discounts at so many of the area museums, attractions, including the Barclays Center.
Yeah,
the Barclays
That's
Center.
why I got it. I was like, you get discounts at every museum.
Well, and you love art direction.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's great art direction, Laura Stiles is there.
I appreciate a good exhibit.
Miss Malalis, I'm saying that right?
Yep.
Okay. Your main job every day is?
So the Commission on Human Rights in New York City, we are the city agency that is responsible for enforcing the city's anti-discrimination and anti-harassment protections across the city.
Okay.
And when I say across the city, I mean in several contexts. So in housing, in employment, in places of public accommodations. We have something that is called discriminatory harassment, which is like the civil form of a hate crime. We also have jurisdiction over something called bias-based profiling by law enforcement. So we have all of these different jurisdictions, and there's over 22 areas of protection in New York City. Like, I'll tell you some of the areas of protection that
I'm trying to digest everything you just said.
Well, I mean, like, people are at least accustomed to hearing about, you can't discriminate against somebody because of their race or because of their national origin or their religion. Then New York City has some areas of protection that are pretty cool, that are pretty unique or pretty robust when you compare them to other jurisdictions. So, for instance, one of the first new areas, one of the first new amendments we added to the law when I first came on to the commission is we added the nation's most robust ban-the-box protection. And that's so important because
and
folks
ban-the-box was about people with felonies.
People with criminal history, period.
Criminal history, period.
Yep. So people with criminal history being kind of disenfranchised from the employment market because automatically on applications or in interviews, folks would be asking about their criminal history. And from the get-go, that application would just be thrown out in the garbage.
Yep.
But now in New York City, for most employers, that's illegal. In New York City, it's illegal to ask about any sort of criminal history until after conditional offer of employment is extended. That means people have to be judged on their qualifications for the job before you're looking at their criminal history.
Now, you said most.
Yep.
Where are the places that people don't honor this?
Well, there's a few exemptions that are worked in under the law. Well, they were because of what those specific positions are.
Like if you want to work at a school, maybe around children.
Well, there's certain categories of employers or roles or positions where just by virtue of what they're doing, like for instance, a lot of the uniformed agencies in New York City, like working for PD, where they can ask for that much earlier in the process because, of course, this is something that they're looking at very early on, and why go through the whole process.
Having people with a criminal history working to enforce laws is kind of, there's a discrepancy there is what you're saying.
Well, we're taking it into account is considered a more legitimate space of consideration.
So I just read an article, or it was a headline in the paper. It was on the cover of the paper this week. Mayor de Blasio wants to make sure every criminal gets a job, was kind of like what the headline was reading. And it was about how Mayor de Blasio wants to put money aside to make sure that there are jobs.
Yep.
And I think in line with what you're talking about, for people who have served their time and are looking to get back into the workforce. So it's about the article or the piece read about job creation that the city was creating. Is this something that this information that you're privy to? Do you know about this?
Yes. I mean, well, the announcement was just a few days ago. It
Yes.
obviously works in very well with what we do because we want to make sure folks who were formerly incarcerated, people from reentry communities, they know what their rights are when they're getting out. This happens so often. And, when I have conversations with people who are formerly incarcerated, oftentimes they say, I had no idea.
Right.
I had no idea. So they'll actually, they'll go places, they'll see something on the application and they'll think, okay, I'm going to walk right out. I'm not even going to put myself out there. Forget about this. And what we're saying to them, the Commission on Human Rights is saying, if you see on an application, you bring the application into the Commission on Human Rights. Call us up, 311, ask for human rights, 718-722-3131. Those are often per se violations of the statute. If we can't get people into jobs after they've been incarcerated, we're excluding, obviously, I mean, I don't have to tell anyone here, but we're excluding, whole scores of people with families.
Laura's the only one with a criminal record in this.
I do not have a criminal record.
Are you going to lie? You going to lie to these people?
I don't have a criminal record.
You were in jail in Mexico.
It's not on my record.
But let me
Really?
say
How'd
this.
you get around that?
But let me say this, if she does.
It's not part of this conversation.
But let me say this, and if she does, you should be able to get a job in New York City.
Yeah, and
that's
Well,
the point.
luckily she has me and I take care of her, but I'm the only one at this station who doesn't have a criminal record at all. The rest of these people are
No,
criminals.
I mean, time and time again, we've heard stories, and our friends that have been formerly incarcerated and have trouble, getting back into system, into normal lives, getting a regular job. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's great. And also, you guys cover sexual harassment in the workplace.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was, Ibra, before you walked in, I was telling her about a time where I experienced sexual harassment in the workplace.
Where?
And I don't
Here at Hot 97?
No.
Yo, let's press charges. Turn it up,
at
B.
another
We'll be on
job.
the
I
cover.
was really young, and I was really intimidated on how to go about it. And people in the job where I was working, it was my first corporate job. They kind of convinced me to make it go away. We'll give you XYZ when you're leaving if you don't talk about it.
Whoa.
And then I thought in my head, I was like, I got to get a lawyer. I don't have money to handle all the legal fees. And if I knew that I could call somebody and to get, first of all, the correct way of going about and handling things. And I didn't even know that you don't need tons of money to get the representation that I needed.
Well, this is what I was telling Laura. I mean, the Commission on Human Rights in New York City was specifically created for people who don't have resources, for people who don't have money to retain a lawyer and go through that whole process. You do not need a lawyer to file a complaint of discrimination or harassment with the Commission on Human Rights. We want to make sure that if you're exposed to sexual harassment, if you're having to go through that in the workplace, just because you're filing at the City Commission on Human Rights without a lawyer doesn't mean you get discount justice. What you're getting as a remedy, whether it's money damages or you get your job or you get freedom from that abusive work environment, it shouldn't be different because you have no money. And I was telling Laura, just, in my first year at the commission, we wanted to make a very loud statement on this. So we had a case in front of us where there was, egregious sexual harassment that a woman was being exposed to. And in that case, we levied the highest fine ever at the commission, $250,000 against that bad actor because we said no more.
Right.
No more. Not tolerable.
She was also telling me about a black woman who had 2 kids, and she was trying to hail a cab, and right in front of her, how many times have we seen this? A cab goes right by her and picks up a white woman. Well, she filed a discrimination complaint. And how much did they fine the cab driver?
So there was $7,000 that went to the woman who was discriminated against, and $7,000 in city penalties. I mean, I just did an op-ed on this in the Amsterdam News.
Yeah.
Race discrimination. How many times? I mean, everyone, right? People live with this, and they think to themselves, you know what? It's just normalized. It's part of life. I have to deal with it. No, that's not what New York City stands for. You do not have to live with it here in New York City. Report it. Even if you see other people experiencing it, report it. I mean, we see this so much. I've been seeing this so much on social media. Black women at work.
Yes.
Oh, my God. How often? I mean, and my wife is Black. How many stories do I have from that, or from friends that I have, from people that we have in our lives? It's normalized. It can't be normalized. We have to put a stop to it. Call the Commission on Human Rights. Report this when it's going on. And if you see that it's happening to your coworker, you see it's happening to somebody in your area, oftentimes they're not the ones who are able to do it. They have other things going on. They're worried about putting themselves out there.
Yeah.
If you're seeing it and you're not saying it, you're ratifying it. Come in and report it.
And the sad part, you know, I've worked at the corporate level for a long time. Unfortunately, we work here, so it's multicultural. There's women in powerful positions. So working in entertainment, well, media per se, and hip-hop and radio, which I've done most of my life, there's so many different types of people from all walks of life just because that's the way the music and the culture is, right?
Yep.
But you still have an environment where people go through sexual harassment, or, you know, someone says a slick comment in a meeting, or someone gets ostracized for something, they're embarrassed, and people are taking things lightly. And often I've seen it happen, even with sexual harassment, where people are encouraged to not say anything because they don't want to be identified by the greater kind of media community as somebody who started a problem. And so they get scared out of speaking up for themselves, so they swallow it, they take it, and they go on about their business. But part of, I think, the work in all of human rights is a cultural shift, right? Because 2017, it feels like it's been a long time since the 70s or even the 60s or the 80s or the 90s, but it hasn't really. And there's a lot of things that culturally have been acceptable out in the world that come into the workplace, and people don't think, for whatever privilege they have, that they have to be sensitive to other people's sensitivities. And I think some of this work is a cultural shift that we have to get accustomed to through making sure people know that they've pissed you off or hurt your feelings, and sometimes finding them or getting them in trouble or reporting them so that they don't do that to someone else. But also continuing to have these conversations so that people know, yo, you're hurting people's feelings.
Right.
And you're making people feel unaccepted, especially in the workplace where they're coming to do a great job and feed their families. Like, that's why people come to work, right? So that they can...
And Ibra, there's a few things that you've said in that, right? So if I look just at this last year alone, complaints of discrimination or reports of discrimination at the commission are up by 60%.
Yeah, I was going to say, and it's a
60%,
lot
right?
of Arabic, or a lot of Muslim, Arabic, Jewish women.
Well, I was going to say, so if I segregate the information and I just look at complaints that are about race, national origin, immigration status, religion, just take those. If I segregate those out, you know, immigration status, all that, that's 30% increase. But I mean, just even looking at race alone, if I look back and I look at our stats right now, we're actively investigating over 300 cases of discrimination based on race. And of those cases, you know, the great majority of those, 67%, are filed by Black New Yorkers. People saying, you know what, enough. This is not okay. So we get at this with law enforcement at the Commission on Human Rights. But another very important thing that we do is we do community relations and education work. So one, for most of the settlements, if not all the settlements we have when somebody is found to have discriminated, part of the settlement is that they also have to engage in some sort of workshop or training at the Commission on Human Rights and post folks' rights and the law in, you know, their place of business. The other thing that we do that's very important is that we've created now these workshops. There are workshops that are kind of know your rights perspective, and there are workshops that are know your obligations perspectives, right? And a lot of them have to deal with the city human rights law. So know what the law is, you know your rights, and you know what you should be doing and shouldn't be doing. But it's also cultural competencies, right? So one of the things we launched last year is kind of Trans 101 cultural competency workshop. We partnered with the LGBT Center here in New York City, and we said we want folks to know not just what their rights and obligations are in the space of trans rights, gender identity, and gender expression. We want folks to be able to have this open space where they can ask these questions like, why does it matter if I'm misgendering somebody? You know, what is it like to be somebody of trans experience? Like, how does that operate
people aren't
for people?
sensitive. They're not aware.
They're not sensitive to that, right? And then we followed that up. So we created another workshop on understanding Muslim communities, combating Islamophobia. And then we have other things in process right now, one of which is talking about race. We got to talk about race, folks. If we're ever really going to get down and dig into this and stop this,
don't be afraid of it.
We got to talk about it.
Yeah. And also... people don't even understand, and we have this conversation a lot about just relationships, human relationships in general. so that on a more personal level, people can start to empathize, right?
Yep.
And understand that, like, even in your household, even in your own personal relationship, not respecting someone's pain or not respecting someone's feelings doesn't have you a healthy relationship. Like, you won't have a healthy relationship with that. If you and your wife are getting into it, or you and your man, or, you know, me and my lady are getting into it, and we have a disagreement, vetting that disagreement, having the conversation is how you have a healthy relationship. Yeah. But somehow out in the real world, outside of homes, and maybe people don't practice it in their own homes, which is why they can't relate to it, where you're not sensitive to someone saying, no, you're not being sensitive to what just hurt my feelings or my struggle or my pain or the things I'm going through. And how off-putting that is, and can create a divide socially where we aren't able to communicate, and it becomes more of a battle between people. Yep. Instead of a free flow of information where somebody can go, yo, I didn't really like that, man, because my people went through X, Y, and Z. Somebody go, oh, I never even thought of that. Yeah. Boom. Yeah. Just being able to have the conversation.
That compassion, right? That compassion or that empathy. You know, I think my Twitter handle talks about like sightings of compassion, unicorns, and mermaids, because we have to show and we have to find compassion and empathy. I think that's what you're describing. Yeah. But I will say, you know, in what we are seeing nationally and what we're seeing locally, one of the things I'm so proud of, one of the reasons that I love I Heart New York City is we hear also in media, we hear terrible acts of hate and we hear terrible acts of discrimination. But in New York City, we also hear a lot of empathy and compassion.
Right.
People on the subways saying, you know what, this isn't okay. We see swastikas over here, we're cleaning that up. Yeah. We see somebody, you know, my sister here wearing a hijab is being attacked, is being vilified. I'm going to step in and talk to her and say, you know what, ignore this person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Look at me here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I also think that that's one of the things that's really special about New York City. And that's one of the reasons, frankly, that the Commission on Human Rights is so important for me here, is that in New York City, we value diversity. Inclusion is our bedrock. This is what we stand for. Yeah. And we're not going to let that just go away. We're not going to let people dilute our personality that way. And part of that is reporting things into the Commission on Human Rights.
Do you feel, and I mean, there's clear evidence that the tone on a national level of our country has changed the amount of complaints that you're getting in your office because of the way the current president speaks to people and his cabinet speaks to people. We've talked a lot heading into Donald Trump becoming the president. We talked a lot about tone, like, if, you know, because there's a lot of people who vote or don't vote who don't think voting for a president would change their life in any way. And we found ourselves specifically talking about the tone of leadership, you know, and what it can feel like. Maybe it doesn't change your bank account. Maybe it doesn't change, you know, the reality of your personal relationship or your family or your career path. But when you have leadership at the national level, or even let's say at the local level, when Giuliani was mayor and the way that felt, right, because of how he was as a mayor and how he treated people and his administration treated people, there was a certain tone that was set. Talk a little bit about tone of New York City and what's trickled down to us, courtesy of what's happening on a national level.
Well, I mean, I guess a few things in that, right? So you were, you know, I started as chair and commissioner at the New York City Commission on Human Rights just a little bit over 2 years ago. So Mayor de Blasio appointed me at the end of 2014. Then I actually took on the role in February of 2015. This is my first time working in government, working, you know, this way in public service. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to work for a leader. I wanted to work for somebody who was all about equity and equality. That's the platform. And I was very pleased when, you know, Mayor de Blasio was running, that was his platform, and that's been his platform, you know, going through, you know, since he's been in office. I think that what he has been trying to set when we're talking about leadership tones is that government does not have to be this oppressive force. For too long, historically, you know, name a municipality, and sadly, I think this is what people are feeling on the national level, on the federal level. Government is this heavy force. It's this thing to be feared, and that does not have to be government. Government at the local level, I think, is what we are trying to bring home as government is a resource. It is really the source out there for the folks most vulnerable in the communities. That's what government's supposed to be doing. And so when I look back also in the last 2 years that I've been here, that's really the tone of leadership and government that we've been trying to put out there. If you're the most vulnerable folks in New York City, if you are the folks who have generally had really troubled relationships with government, if you have felt oppressed because of government or law enforcement, I get it. There's a long history of this. In New York City, I think we have a mayor, and now we have a commissioner at PD who is really trying to repair that and set us on the right direction. But I understand the history. And so folks have to know that if you're experiencing certain things and you're worried about going to government, they have to know that there is a place that is friendly, not only friendly, but is created specifically for you.
And we'll listen.
And we'll listen. I mean, this to me is what is awesome. So a few things that I'm just going to put out there because I'm proud of, right? When I first got to the commission, there were 6 languages spoken across the agency. We now have 29.
Wow.
Now. 29, because we're in New York City, we're representing New York City. We have to sound like New York City, you know? And then also we're there where we're now talking to, if you look at our campaigns in the past, disenfranchised communities. The first 2 citywide campaigns that we did, credit history discrimination and ban the box. 2 areas where disproportionately they're affecting women and communities of color, right? Last year, another citywide campaign we did, it was making sure that every New Yorker is able to use bathrooms and single-sex facilities consistent with their gender identity and gender expression. You want to talk about disenfranchised communities? Look at our transgender brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Especially our, transgender people of color.
Yeah.
And then in September, after we had seen that there were, I think, 3 Muslim New Yorkers killed over the course of something like 2 months, we said, you know what, we're not having this. New York City is going to lead. New York City is going to say, you know what, we are government and we're here to protect you. So we launched another citywide campaign, I Am Muslim NYC, where we put faces out there of some of our Muslim brothers and sisters, and we drove the point home that, 1, we got your back. If you're Muslim in New York City, you are not a stranger. You are a part of the city. You're a part of the fabric.
I've been a part of it for a long time.
Exactly. And you are contributing in so many ways. And 2, if you're going to mess with them, if you're going to discriminate or harass our Muslim brothers and sisters, you're going to have to pay a fine for it. Penalties up to $250,000 for a discriminatory act. Don't do it. We don't tolerate it.
But that's why it's important for people to report it.
Exactly.
Yeah, because when I was telling her at first, a lot of people get discouraged. They feel like they're going to report it and it's going to go nowhere.
Well,
so I think it's good that she's here to say, look, we exist. And it's like we need to push for people to be active. And even when people are not, putting in reports about things in discrimination that's happening to themselves, like if you witness it, go ahead and report it.
We have to be there for each other in New York City. This is New York City. And when I hear that we're not doing that, I think to myself, you know what, New York City, we're better than this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not what this city's about. Carmelina.
Carmelina is actually what my mother used to call me when she was mad at me.
So that's why you keep correcting me.
Yeah, I have.
Carmelita!
Wait, so is your real name Carmelina? And Mom would say, because my mom calls me Ibrahim when she was mad. She was Ibrahim.
No, well, my name is Laura, and my mom used to be like, Laudiana. She would just make it up. I'm like, what is that? That's not my name.
That? I'm going to start calling you
No,
Loriana.
don't.
Loriana Styles.
No, we have to say it like in a Spanish accent.
Loriana.
Thank you so much.
The Commissioner of Human Rights here in New York City, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And once again, if people want to reach out, have complaints, 311 is a number that most people in New York City know, but other than that.
So 311, ask for human rights. If you call 718-722-3131, you'll get us directly.
Is there somebody in the front? Who picks up the phone over there?
We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We have a website. Click onto our website because we also have a newsletter.
Okay.
Folks can sign up for a newsletter and they'll get all the updates on what their new protections are in New York City.
Can they name drop you when they call?
They can say, hey, Commissioner on Human Rights. If they say Commissioner Carmelin P. Malalis, people will be like, you have called the right place.
Yeah.
Carmelin P. told me to call. Yo, where's she at? Yo, I got a problem. Yo, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.